Let's Talk Assassin's Creed, your number one podcast for all things Assassin's Creed.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 108 of Let's Talk Assassin's Creed. In this episode, we're going to talk about the titles of Assassin's Creed. Some of the early games didn't have a title, they just had a number, whereas more recently, all of the games have had a title that describes the setting or the tone or the characters. And to talk about those missing titles and maybe come up with some ideas of better titles, we're joined by three special guests. We have our returning guest, Ammit. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure to have you back on the show. You've been on the show a number of times, but this is the first time you've joined us with me as co-host, and I'm really happy just to be talking to you. This is going to be great. Also, welcome to the show, Bravo.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here.
And Steph, welcome.
Hello.
So, Declan, where do we start?
We started me regretting having 5 audio streams to edit. This is going to be merry. So I think the biggest place to start is a question that I would like to get everyone's thoughts on. After Assassin's Creed 3, we started getting the more snazzy titles like Black Flag, Rogue, Unity, and so on. Do you guys, in your opinion, think the games would sell if I said to you, hey, this is Assassin's Creed 11? Not Valhalla, it's 11. Do you really think that could sell as well? Or would you put up, as a consumer and a fan of the series, would you get really bored if they just said, hey, this is Assassin's Creed 11, go buy it? Bravo, you first?
I think it was actually a really good choice to not continue with the numbering system, because I, as a consumer, would not be interested in the games whatsoever if you just went to tell me, yeah, this is the next number in the series, go buy it. Having a name, I think, really gives it some kind of identity. It gives it some sort of life almost. Whereas if you just gave me another number, I wouldn't really feel anything for it. At least a name, at least, gives you some sort of idea as to what it will be like. And I think it was also a good idea to sort of keep the numbering for one more game, because I think Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag kind of sounds better than Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Just a random little thought there.
Before I pass on to Steph...
Ammit, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, sorry. I think Steph raised her hand before me, but that's okay. No, I agree. I think that the numbering would also be less immediate. Like as humans, we have associations of ideas, and like numbers are not associated with anything. But if you say something like, oh, Odyssey, then, my mind is going to start picturing, I don't know, the Greek islands and ships and, the 1,000 ships and monsters and Cyclops and Minotaurs and what have you. And if you say Valhalla, I'm going to visualize a completely different type of environment even before seeing anything about the game. So I think that giving these titles for, as questionable as they can be, really helps people pre-visualizing the game even before they know what the game is about. So you have already an idea. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect
Can I go
sense.
ahead and follow up? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, I was just about to pass the mic to you as well. You beat me to it.
Perfect. Yeah, I was going to follow... No, thank you. Sorry about that. I was going to follow up with that exact same comment. I think kind of considering even post-release too, it's so much easier to talk about these video games with your friends, or even if you're trying to pitch the idea of, okay, look, Assassin's Creed is a huge franchise, but there's all of these different historical points. Are we talking about pirates? Are we talking about the Victorian era? Are we talking about, about Vikings or Spartans and stuff like that? So I think that's part of it too. If I may also provide a comparison, I don't know if any of you are into Final Fantasy, but it is a little daunting to keep up with I think it's 15 titles of Final Fantasy at the moment. And part of it is kind of there's delay in production, or they're postponing deadlines all the time. But it's so much easier to talk about a story when you have a title that goes along with it, as opposed to Final Fantasy 6, Final Fantasy 7. Wait a second, which one had Cloud? Which one had Bart, and so on and so forth?
I know nothing about Final Fantasy. I want to know which one did have Cloud.
That's
7.
going to be number 7.
Okay,
It was
good. Thank
7.
you.
Yes, I was right. I was going to say 7. I was
You were
right.
right. Excellent. Excellent.
I've always wanted to play Final Fantasy, but it's the numbering that just pushes me off, especially when you got an MMO that's like 14 and you're like, huh? Where does that follow canonically? Bravo, over to you.
Yeah, following up from that, I think it's definitely just very daunting with Final Fantasy. Just going on a little tangent here. Just every single number, you're like, which is which? I have no idea. Whereas with Assassin's Creed, you kind of get some sort of mental pictures just from seeing that name. And following up from that, I also found it interesting that, at least to me, the RPG names versus the games before it were slightly different, because I felt like the RPG names were kind of trying to invoke some sense of like a big grand adventure, especially with Odyssey and Valhalla. Whereas before that, it was more like some kind of idea. Like you kind of had the idea of like unity between people, or syndicate, the idea of a syndicate, whereas the RPG names kind of felt to me like it was trying to evoke thoughts of a big grand adventure and everything that would come with it, like the boundless infinite ideas.
The one that's an outlier there, what you were saying there, and what Ammit said about Odyssey, gives very specific images in your mind of an ancient Greek adventure. Valhalla puts you straight away in the situation of, this is a Norse adventure or a Norse raiding adventure. The outlier is Origins, where, yes, I appreciate the name is about the origins of the hidden ones, but it's not a geographical or a time period specific title. I don't know what you would have picked that would have been kind of specific to the time period or specific to Egypt geographically. But Origins is the outlier, isn't it, of the recent 6 or 7 titles that we've had. There's a lot of hands raised. Ammit, this is an Origins area. I'm going to go straight to you.
Thank you. Yes, I was actually thinking about that while I was jogging back to my house before this podcast. And it's true that it's the outlier, but I think that it works really well because it leaves you guessing until you understand what is the origin of, right? Because you don't get big spoilers, and I'm the spoiler person, like, spoiler alert, like you don't get what is it the origin of until they found the hidden ones that then will become the Brotherhood and the Assassins, and they're like, oh, I see why this is origin. If they had given it another more, Oriental, whatever name. First of all, you always fall into the danger of Orientalism, which is never a good thing, because if they had called it, I don't know, Assassin's Creed Aspis, or like, I don't know, Pyramid or something of the sort, you're like, oh God, why are we back in the 1800s?
Yeah.
But I think that Origin works because it leaves you guessing. You don't know anything about it, and you keep asking origin of what, and then you realize, and then there's the the meta in the meta of the symbol of the assassins being explained with the eagle skull, like it's the print of an eagle skull from the top on the sand. So you're like, oh, it's also the origin of the symbol, not just of the the ideals and the idea of a brotherhood. So I think it does work. But it was, I don't know if like I'm making too much of that, I'm giving too much credit, or if they thought about it all that way. And then they were like, yes, we need to go with Origins. Also, I know that there are like working names while they're working on project. So I don't know if that was the original name that was intended, or if they changed it halfway through.
Yeah, it's a good point, because it makes you wonder actually how many names were kind of put up on a wall in a marketing room somewhere and then discarded or focus group tested. But Declan, you've had your hand up. You wanted to speak for a few minutes. Go ahead.
And I forgot my mic was on mute, so this really helps. I'm doing great tonight. The only worry I have with the names is they spoil the magic of the games. And I know that sounds really silly to say, but when someone says to me, oh, Assassin's Creed Black Flag, you automatically know it's pirates. So you know that the whole game's going to center around pirates, and it's going to involve piracy, and obviously you're going to be on a pirate ship. And that's the magic of the game's lost. I think the biggest ruin for me is Valhalla itself. I love Valhalla and I love the name, but because I'm into Norse mythology, I know Valhalla is the Viking afterlife, and I know that it's where the warriors go when they die. So I knew that it's going to have to incorporate Valhalla somehow, the afterlife. And after the third cutscene of Confession Corridor, I questioned in the system server, is Harvey Eivor? Are they one and the same? And when I figured out they were one and the same, I knew automatically that Valhalla must be something to do with Isu. There must be a sage connection, there must be a temple connection. And, this is like about 20 hours into the game, so I'm already running through the thoughts that when I see Valhalla and I see how it's all working, I'm like, oh, cool, but, I've kind of already guessed this. I wish I didn't know about it, or I didn't see the threads earlier, because I would have liked a bit more jaw-dropping moment, not like, that's cool and I love it, but, I've already figured it out. I already knew we were going to get there. And I do love Zavala, and I do love the simulation. I'm just wish I didn't know I could see it coming. Steph?
Yeah, that was a really interesting opinion and thought, because so for me, I kind of see things, or at least if I may offer this perspective that's coming in from someone who may have never ever played Assassin's Creed. So for example, when Odyssey was released, for me, that was a time where I was not playing Assassin's Creed at the time, which was very, very disappointing and embarrassing. But I played through Odyssey and I love it and everything. But my friend who had never played Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and I've known him since we were in university together. And all I could do when I was a university student was just rave and talk about how much I loved Assassin's Creed. And so, a couple years passed and he reaches out to me and he goes, "Hey, Assassin's Creed Odyssey was just released." And I was like, "Oh, you're finally playing Assassin's Creed? That's cool." And he was just like, "It's the perfect game. I love this game so much." So it's kind of interesting because on one hand, Declan, your point is it's actually very fascinating in that, as a person who has been a fan for quite some time, that element of surprise would have been so exciting, especially when you think of a name like Assassin's Creed Unity or Assassin's Creed Origin. There's that level of mystery behind it, and that's what's really, really exciting. But on the other hand, I think kind of on a marketing perspective and maybe even just an overall general interest perspective to kind of encourage more people to get into the franchise, I think there's just that kind of so my friend from college, he was interested in Assassin's Creed through Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So I thought that was really fantastic and really exciting. And I think that's kind of most of my thoughts with that. So Bravo, if you wanted to go ahead and input your thoughts.
Yeah, so I was thinking, going off of what Ammit was saying earlier, and you were saying as well, with the titles, each title kind of had its own idea in a way. Like each title, oh my god, I cannot speak today. What I was trying to say is there was like almost in my mind two different versions of the titles, like two different things they were going for. Like one group of the titles was almost going for a concept or an idea that like I can't even speak today. Can we just start this thing over again or something? I need to gather my thoughts. I can't.
One of the rules of this podcast is that we don't edit. And if you ever listen to us, you will know the number of times I've said to Declan, "I've messed this up. Can we edit that out?" And he never does.
No.
Oh no.
So I tell you what. Let me ask our three guests a question. Two-part question, and I'm going to do this in the order that I see the names on the screen. So, Steph, which was the first game in the franchise you played, and did the title of the game draw you in, or was it something else that drew you in?
Oh, this is a great question. So I technically purchased Assassin's Creed 3 first because it came as a bundle pack with the PlayStation 3 at the time. But because I'm just like this purist good noodle, I have to start everything from the beginning. So Assassin's Creed was actually a franchise that I wanted to dabble in for a long time. At the time that I started gaining interest, Assassin's Creed 2 was released. So I was always very intrigued by this concept of cloaked individuals. Like, I kind of, unfortunately, I don't know if it's unfortunate or not, but I romanticize these types of things a lot. Um, and so I used to read a lot of fan fiction. I used to look into the fan art and everything, and I was just so drawn to just kind of the scope of the Assassin's Creed franchise. So technically speaking, like, kind of what really drew me in was in part the visualizations that the fans have created, and also in part of the title. The name is Assassin's Creed. I absolutely adore the concept of assassins abiding by a set of rules. So I think that's just kind of the best way that I can answer it for myself, which of course, the more and more I dabbled into the franchise, kind of the romanticizations that I made in my head were completely different from what the franchise ended up being, but like in the best way possible, because this is just one of those things where I've actually wrote in my professional work website bio profile thing that I am a huge fan of the franchise, and I'm definitely not ashamed to share that with our with our professionals.
That's great. What you said there, it reminds me, we will go to Ammit and Bravo just to ask them the same two-part question, but what you said there reminds me of something that Servalan said when she joined us for our Arno Dorian episode about 5 or 6 weeks ago. And she said she didn't really know the franchise like you, other than guys in hoods. And she really enjoyed, she played Unity as her first game. That was her entry into the franchise. But she really took pleasure, not just from the game, but from unpicking the story as she was playing and working out who are the assassins, who are the Templars, what are they fighting over, what do the different factions believe. So it's interesting that I see a similarity there between your sort of exploration and hers. Let's move on. Ammit, what was the first game that you played? And again, was it the title that drew you in? Was it, like Steph, was it more about artwork or fan creations?
I know that you are all expecting a saucy answer about women, but actually not. Surprise. So
we can have that answer if you like.
I know you all expected me to yell, it was Valka. No, it wasn't. Um, so I was studying for my comprehensive exams in Vancouver. And for ones that don't know, comprehensive exams are like the giant exams that you take before you can propose a PhD title and project, and they're like the biggest hurdle that you have to pass. So to pass the time, I was watching people on Twitch play Assassin's Creed, and I saw the trailer, like the cinematic trailer for Origins, and I was like, what is this? Like, this is a game in ancient Egypt, and it has snakes, and it has a great music, and the graphics looks fantastic. But my computer couldn't, play it at the time because I had an old computer. However, the gods smiled upon me because my neighbor, I was living like in a grad student's arrangement. My neighbor, who is actually a like an electronic engineer, she works in video games, actually had a console and Origins. So I went to her room pretty often to play Origins with her, and then while I was waiting to get a new computer and get Origins after the exams, because I knew if I had bought that, I would have never passed my exams and never studied ever again. I played Brotherhood because I'd heard about it from a friend, like when it came out originally, but I did not care at the time. And then I played Assassin's Creed 2 because I'm a chaotic person. And then I managed to get the new computer and get Origins, and I played it. And I already had like a general idea of what the Assassin's Order was and what the tenets were, but actually playing Origins after seeing the Renaissance Brotherhood really gave me a bit of historical perspective on the whole thing, and I absolutely loved it. And then when Odyssey came out, I got it because, classical archaeology is what I do, and then I was hooked. And then I played Unity right after Valhalla while I was waiting for Siege of Paris to get into Paris. Then I played Revelations. Like, I did not play them in order, but like the more I played, the more I was like, yes, these are concepts that I care about. And the sci-fi element really did not get to me until I played Valhalla. And then I was like, yes, this is the Izu stuff I like. This is how it should be done. And I absolutely love it. And then I went and replayed parts of the others to actually go and see, you know, the pieces of Eden and everything else. So I went in for Egypt, stayed for the plot, and then stayed for the women, and then went back for the to the Izu. You know, a large
It's a
large
perfect
answer,
circle. Love it. Love it.
right? So it all came back to Egypt, because apparently I can never get away from it.
But your introduction to the franchise and your early, should we say, choices are the same as mine. I started with Odyssey, and then I did Origins, and then I jumped to Victorian London. So I was also all over the place until I kind of at the start of this year, thought, right, it's time to sit down and do this properly and play them all in order and, you know, get the story. Bravo, let's go to you. So first game, and was it the title that drew you in? Was it something else?
So for me, mine was kind of weird because I started literally with the first game, Assassin's Creed 1, and it was a combination of factors that drew me in fact. For one, it was the whole concept of the game itself, just having that switching between the Animus story and the in-person story, all those combinations of factors that just honestly made it really interesting for me. And it was also the fact that I had gotten it in my Steam library some years prior, and I never played it, and I was like, oh, this looks interesting. I might as well get it. Or might as well play it, rather. And then after the first game, I kind of ended up jumping all over the place. I went to the second game, and then after that, I just jumped all around. I went to Odyssey, and then I went to Syndicate, and then I just jumped all around over the place. And at some point, I'm definitely going to actually sit down, probably soon, and play them all in order and properly, because I still haven't even played through all of them properly yet, so I really should do that.
Understood. Steph, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, so I think I wanted to also kind of pose this interesting thing where when I got into Assassin's Creed personally, I didn't think of Assassin's Creed as a historical fiction franchise. I thought of it as, oh, there's just a whole bunch of really hot dudes in clothing. I love that, or hooded clothing, I should say. And it's not like Pokemon, where, you know, in Pokemon, the region is based off a different country or a different culture. So first 3 Pokemon games were based off Japan, and then, well, I think it's the first 4 actually. So, sorry fans if you're a fan of Pokemon, but you know, after that, you know, one was based off New York, and so on and so forth. One was based off France, where Assassin's Creed is kind of this fun historical fiction thing where on one hand you can have fun when there are historical accuracies, and on the other hand, you also, if you're a history buff, you know, there's also that kind of opportunity to be like, aha, this is incorrect, but it's, you know, done so in a way that's entertaining, and that's what I appreciate about it. And like I mentioned, I don't think that's necessarily in the title until later on in the games. So that's where we kind of go back to this idea of how Assassin's Creed Black Flag, that's about pirates. And it's like, oh, okay, people who are interested in pirates may or may not be interested in this, and so on and so forth. Declan, did you want to say something?
Oh, my mic is on. Fine, I'm getting better at this. So one of the things I was interested to learn from all of you is, by technicality, Ezio's trilogy is the first that explored the single title names. You know, was Assassin's Creed 2, but then it was Brotherhood Revelations, and even though they're, in my opinion, technically spin-offs, because they follow Ezio, and then it's technically 3 that follows a whole continuation, but I'm going to get shot for saying that, so I'll digress.
That's a bold statement.
I
Brotherhood
know.
and Revelations are spin-offs.
I know, I'm going to get in trouble for that, but I'm going to get in trouble. I really don't want to have to explain this to fans in the
You're
future.
going to get in big trouble for that.
I
That
know.
one was too far.
I'm
Across
scared.
the line.
Hand
I'm
back your
scared.
gamer card right now, my friend.
How very dare you, sir? How very dare you?
I'm terrified. Okay, I'm gonna go with my train of thought. So the train of thought I was trying to
Don't let us throw you off, mate. You carry on. You just keep talking, and we promise not to distract you.
I'm very curious because a lot of pieces are canonical even to the current main story.
I think before I go into the points about the title, the reason why I say Brotherhood and Revelations feel more spin-offy is it's hard to word it with my brain not working properly as normal, but the game length story, setting, all felt very small. It didn't feel as big or as grandeur as Assassin's Creed 2 and Assassin's Creed 3 did. They felt very samey as the last one, whereas 3 explored in large details of the homestead, a little bit of sailing, the new aiming, stealth, dual story between Haytham and Connor. But Brotherhood and Revelations, because they followed Ezio, to me I didn't see very big changes in the story, very big changes in how they were handled, the mechanics. The mechanics for all 3 feel very the same. They don't even tell you in Revelations that if you hold Y, because I played on 360, you could throw heavy weapons, and that's a cool little mechanic, but it's not explained very well. And the only mechanic that really added was crafting in Revelations, but it wasn't really needed that much. So that's just my 2 cents, and I'm probably going to get lynched for that.
No, not at all. I think there's a fair point there. You look at especially Odyssey and Valhalla. If you want to play those 2 games and you want to do the side stuff, you're looking at 100 hours plus easily. Whereas the 3 Ezio games, you can do those main stories in 15 hours? Less, maybe, if you really sprint through it. Nowadays, the game that's the size of AC2, Brotherhood and Revelations, that's a DLC like Siege of Paris or Legacy of the First Blade or whatever. So there's definitely a scale. The scale nowadays is a whole nother league above what we had with the early games. So I get your point. It's like 3 parts of a trilogy. Well, it's exactly what it is. It's 3 chapters from a book rather than, a massive encyclopedia like we get nowadays. And they are very similar, that's true. And they were punting those games out every year, whereas nowadays, well, we don't know what's going to happen in the next few years, but there's been kind of 18 months to 2 years between each release. Steph, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it too is I don't think at that time DLCs were popular, right? I think at that time DLCs were something that like only maybe like 1 or 2 major franchises even had. But correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a very, very long time since Assassin's Creed 2 was released, but I think that kind of contributes to it too, where it feels like they're more like extended stories as opposed to actual main story games. And I think that's just kind of what we would compare something like Siege of Paris or oh god, what was the other one called? But basically the
Wrath of the Druids.
Oh yes, thank you so much. Oh my gosh. But yeah, so I don't know. I think those are really good points. Bravo.
So, a tangent about the DLCs that I'm very happy to talk about because I totally forgot my original point.
Is this already a point from about 10 minutes ago?
Exactly.
Okay, good.
So I was going to say, it's kind of interesting because as you go back in time, closer and closer to the origins of gaming, you got in 90s gaming especially, not quite so much what we have with today's DLCs, but you had like expansions, because nowadays we like to put price tags on singular DLCs with like one sizable story, an extra story that adds something to the current game, whereas expansions was like some massive add-on to the game that would add a lot of new content, some new features, some new characters, keeping the core of the game, but maybe adding, in the example of Diablo 2, Lord of Destruction, adding 2 new classes, some new mechanics, new items, a new act, etc. So you would just usually have 1 or 2 expansions. 2 was usually, if the game was lucky, maybe even 3, but that usually never happened. It was usually like 1 big expansion to really add something to a game or re-releases. You didn't really get DLCs like you have today with multiple, $20, $30 DLCs to a game that would be smaller but still sizable stories.
Go on, Declan. Go on, Ammit.
Oh yeah, no, I was about to say like the same thing. I remember I started playing computer games like early-ish. And I remember the excitement when like the first expansion that I can remember came out, and it was for Age of Empires 2. It was the Conqueror's expansion, and it wasn't even called a DLC. It was just an expansion. I was like, oh, this is so cool because it adds to something that I already have, but it gives me something new that is like not too massive, but it's still like cohesive and coherent with the base game. But I don't remember like any other games having really add-ons until later.
I'll tell
And
you
I do
one
think,
that you
no,
and I have both played. Sorry, Ammit, is the Total War series. Even Shogun Total War in
that's
2000
true.
had the Mongol invasion
That's
expansion, if you
true.
remember that. And that
That
again,
is
that's exactly what
true.
you said. It built on the core game, but it added new mechanics, new characters, new enemy types, and so on. And they've always
Mhm.
done a very good job of adding interesting expansions. I think the people at Creative Assembly.
Yeah, that's fair. No, that was the end of my thought. It was just a good memory of like being
Mm.
actually excited for ancient DLCs. And I mean, I have thoughts about the Assassin's Creed DLCs, but I see that other people have their hands up. So
Declan, go on. We may have an audio problem with Declan because we can't hear him. Bravo, take it away.
All right, so I was going to add one more thing to the expansions before we hopefully actually go back to the topic we mean. With the expansions, it's very interesting where you had it that as you started to evolve into closer to today's Windows with Windows 95, then you really got CD-ROMs, and then you had the beginning of today's gaming where you could fit more files and data on something because CD-ROMs were a revolutionary invention. They were really revolutionary because instead of a floppy disk, that tiny 1.44 megs, and you'd have to have like 10 floppy disks to install what would be considered a big game. You had that
SimCity
CD-ROM.
2000, 2 floppy disks. Fantastic game.
Yes. But I know there were some things as you got later that people didn't want to get rid of floppy disks, and you got 10 floppy disks versus one better CD-ROM release,
Absolutely.
which is kind of funny. But, the expansions were just, I think it's a neat concept, and I'm sad they were kind of dropped as gaming evolved, because I think expansions are great, really. I think it's a great way to do a game. You have one or two big additions to something you already have with that nice, you pop in your floppy or your CD-ROM, it's like, game detected on C drive, and you can just happily install it and get to playing. I think I just really like that, the concept of it,
Yeah, understood. Declan, go on. Let's see if we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
So, I may have been drinking a fruit shoot and knocked my microphone off. So, nobody laughed that I was drinking fruit shoot and knocked my microphone.
Nobody's laughing. We're not laughing, we promise. We're all on mute and laughing.
So, really interesting point I would like to question everybody and get your opinion is a lot of games, when they bring a new title out, they do what I call dual titles instead of singular. So Elder Scrolls has like Skyrim, Oblivion, they're all one title. Pokemon eventually went from green, yellow to like Diamond and Pearl, which is dual. But Assassin's Creed has always stuck to single titles for the games after 3, so Black Flag, Unity, Syndicate, but kept dual tags like Wrath of the Druids, Siege of Paris. I really just suddenly forgot Unity's Dead Kings. So, do you think that a single title is more catchy than maybe like, I don't know, Assassin's Creed hang out with your friends? If that makes sense. Steph?
Yeah, this, oh gosh, okay, this is me really thinking, because, so Assassin's Creed Syndicate is just one of my favorites, as I'm sure all of you have realized. And, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, stuff fell from my computer screen, oh no. Anyway.
Steph, just say that again. Which one did you say was your favorite? Did you say 3?
How dare you? So Assassin's Creed Syndicate was the one game where I was incredibly excited for.
Gotcha.
Right. So my university degree is in human biology, and so I absolutely love biology. And there was a lot of our studies involved discussing the Industrial Revolution, and so there's already that layer of coolness in my eyes where there's, oh my gosh, there's Darwin, and there's such and such, and there's conversation about this is how everything looked like during this time period, and this is why our studies make sense and stuff like that. But it's interesting because when you think about the word syndicate, I don't necessarily think about Victorian era London, for example. So I think there's kind of a hand in hand visualization that's important. I don't think I would have been as excited for Assassin's Creed Syndicate if I didn't see kind of, Jacob and Evie's trailers coming out, and, they're just being Jacob and Evie. Well, I guess at the time it was just Jacob, which is kind of really, really sad because Evie's just a fantastic, beautiful character. And, for any fan of Assassin's Creed Syndicate, she basically carries the weight of the whole entire plot. Even after the game is over. But anyway, but yeah, I think a part of it is really just that it is just as important to have kind of the visual aspect of the marketing as well as the name too. So that's just kind of my 2 cents there.
I want to go back then, because I suspect about 30 minutes ago we started talking about Assassin's Creed 1 and 2 and titles. So I want to ask a question to all 4 of you. Assassin's Creed, well, we all call it Assassin's Creed 1, but it wasn't called that. It was just called Assassin's Creed, and I guess retroactively we have put the number 1 in there. That game was set in the 12th century in modern day Syria and Lebanon, I think is where Acre is it? What would you have called that game if you were going to give it that kind of descriptive word, as we see nowadays with Odyssey, Valhalla, Syndicate? Anyone got any nice creative ideas for something to do with an Assassin's Creed game set in that location in that time period? Declan, what do you think?
To be honest, the only good name for Assassin's Creed 1 has been taken by Transmedia, but Assassin's Creed Crusade, if Assassin's Creed 1 shipped as Assassin's Creed Crusade, I think I would have jumped on the bandwagon double quick, because Crusade is one of my favourite historical time periods, and mainly because of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, but the mythology and everything behind it, I think, in my opinion, I can't mentally picture another title other than Assassin's Creed Crusade. Maybe Assassin's Creed I Can't Swim might have been a good one.
What was the Transmedia then that picked up that name? Was it a comic or something else?
I think it's Assassin's Creed Secret Crusade, which is the very first book which follows Altair's life through Assassin's Creed 1 and the 2 DLCs. So the name's taken, but I would prefer to have the game as Assassin's Creed Crusade, just point blank. Give me that.
Makes sense. Yeah, you're right. Secret Crusade was the first novel. And yeah, it's a good title. Ammit, go on.
Yes, I'm going to be the boring, controversial scholar here. I thought about it, and it's dangerous territory, because if you say Crusade, it by default refers to specific ideals, specific conflicts, specific religious conflicts, and you don't want your game to cater to a certain audience that expects certain ideologies to be portrayed in game. And it's difficult to do with something like the Crusades that were, about saying, oh, God wants this, and what God wants is basically genocide, right? So I think that Secret Crusade was a very smart choice, because it says, oh, this is like in the Crusade time, it is about, these kind of people and monastic orders and everything else, but it's not the actual Crusade. It's a secret one, so it's something else. Because with these kind of things, you need to be careful in terms of titles. You can't give titles that can be willfully maybe misinterpreted as endorsing certain ideologies. I don't know if I'm making sense, if I need to be more explicit about it, but it's dangerous, especially when you're talking about conflicts in geographic areas, there are still like a mess right now, and still you have issues with calling it one thing rather than the other, especially around Jerusalem and all of that, and how you call, you know, the holy places, and if you call it the Holy Land, then that's a very Eurocentric vision. So I think that Secret Crusade might have been the smartest decision they ever made in terms of that time period, because it is such a minefield. It's very dangerous to, you know, to keep a sort of neutral stance on a time period that was not neutral at all, right? And it was steeped in very violent and you know, perniciously Eurocentric, Western centric ideals. Sorry for like I literally took like everyone's mood down, but I think these things need to be said.
It's a good point, and there's a whole aspect to. This is something connecting with what I remember listening to on the Sisterhood Speaks podcast. One of the people they interviewed, their role was sensitivity reading. So reading the scripts and saying, does this make sense from non-white, non-male, non-European perspectives, which unfortunately is still how a lot of this media is being created. So yeah, you're absolutely right. You can't just pick any name you like and throw it on the box. You've got to be very careful of the time periods and the people and the religions and the nations involved. Declan, you wanted to say something?
Before I passed on to everyone else to answer, I think listening to Ammit's point, it's a very crucial point, because it just shows that looking at the later games, you know, that have been named, they've chosen names that are very carefully give you a lot more open. You know, Unity can mean 101 things, Syndicate can, Origins can as well. So with the time period, and even though I do really like the Secret Crusade title, maybe it was actually just safer to say Assassin's Creed. And that could be a bit daft, but maybe there isn't another word they could use, because Secret Crusade has been taken by the book. Maybe it was probably just hard for them just to give it a name without, you know, giving a bad ideology or bad press, because it's something I never thought of, because I'm, you know, so used to watching Monty Python's Secret the Holy Grail, learning about how bad the Crusade was and why it shouldn't have happened. You know, I'd never really realised that the name kind of could invoke bad ideology and mentalism when portrayed with something like Assassin's Creed, which is dudes killing dudes because they can.
Yeah, it's probably the one game and the one topic you want to leave well alone is that one. Don't go back and rename it. It's too tricky. All right, so let's move on. So Assassin's Creed 2. Welcome to Italy. It's the 15th century. We've got a young chap called Ezio as our protagonist. What titles would you throw in there as a replacement for the number 2 in the game title? Ammit, take it away.
I'm going to be laughing for a second, and then I'll think of a serious one. But I think Assassin's Creed 2 Punch the Pope would, you know, as they say, pack a punch. I'll think about it.
It definitely gets the story across, doesn't it? That
right.
title.
It's a big spoiler, but you know, could be that.
It's the one kind of spoiler we love in our games.
That's very true. You get to punch the Pope. Go play.
Now I can imagine Ezio just like swinging down from a vine into the church, and he's just like ka-chow, and it's like that Batman and Robin meme.
I think more Assassin's Creed games need the sound effect ka-chow. That's great.
Oh, absolutely. So,
would it be too obvious to call? Go on, Steph.
Were you gonna suggest Assassin's Creed Renaissance? Because, like,
it's the obvious one. Yep, it's the obvious one, Steph.
I think, okay, so here's the thing. When we had this conversation, I think maybe a month or so ago, maybe 2 months ago at this point, I remember saying, okay, Assassin's Creed Renaissance, that's way too obvious. I think there's something more clever. And we ended up going on this conversation for like 10 minutes. And we ended up just saying Assassin's Creed Renaissance was the only choice.
I think so, because it doesn't just work for the time period. It works for Ezio's literal rebirth as an assassin in the Brotherhood, doesn't it? It's perfect.
Exactly.
Um, yeah. Bravo. You wanted to come in.
Yeah, I wanted to say I think the first two games in general are really hard to rename. Like, you can only really give one really good possible name for both of them, and it just happens that the books took those. Because it's like, I can't really think of anything other than The Lost Crusade and Renaissance, because they just perfectly, really, encompass what the games are about. I can't really think of anything else that would really, um, you know, give the idea of what the games are about.
Yeah. Go on, Declan. Oh, Declan, you've raised your hand to speak again.
I forgot to press the unmute button. Leave me alone. Literally having so many audio tracks to go from, trying to be very sensible, because I'm not very sensible normally. So you actually touched upon the name I would have chosen, James, and I'm surprised you didn't jump on it. But Rebirth, Assassin's Creed 2 Rebirth would have been perfect for Ezio, because with what happened to his family, he had to be reborn as somebody new. His family had to live on. Judging in that time, if your family's been done the way the Borgias did to his family, the name would have been dragged through the mud. So Ezio had to rebrand the name, rebirth it. But the Italian Renaissance, and please somebody correct me, was a height of rebirth for the Society of Italy. So it kind of is that double entendre that it is Ezio's rebirth as his family's becoming renewed after, the Templars had come in and just screwed them over. But Ezio himself is being rebirthed into the Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and Italy itself was going through a rebirth at the time, with the big parties, the Renaissance, the artwork, also Leonardo da Vinci doing his stuff, and other famous painters. But I don't know if I'm right in saying that, so I would like someone to correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, you're right. It was a flowering of all sorts of science, of art, of writing, of economics. It was one of those periods of time where sort of society took a leap forward, wasn't it? I can't think of a better name for it. Ammit, go on, help us out here.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. It was like a period of, well, it was called the Renaissance afterwards. I think that the people who lived through it also went through a lot of war, right? That's a problem with being too sentimental and romanticizing history. It was a period of brutal conquest and war and people being quartered in public. So it's not like it was a period of peace and nice things. Some cities had that, like Florence surely had that. And then it all went, up in flames, and then Italy was invaded. So we need to be careful when we are reconsidering history. But I think like Renaissance or Rebirth, if you want to make it, in English, because all of that could be really cool. If you wanted to be like, even cooler and make it a bit more metaphorical and everything else, like from Rebirth to Phoenix, the step is very short. And you could, because being reborn from flames and everything else, and there are flames, the flames of war and the flames of conflicts and all of that. But I do think that it would have been a nice nod to the art to call it Renaissance. And I will say, and then I'll shut up, that there is a mod from Rome Total War 2, for Medieval Total War 2, that is set in the Renaissance, and it's called Machiavello, because,
Oh, now you're talking.
that is the coolest thing. They couldn't call it Machiavello, I think. But, something of the sort. I think it would have been nice to see what they came up with, also like in terms of, the terms that were keywords at the time. Because there were these ideas about how men should be, and they should be polyedric, and they should be all of that. So you could have all sorts of puns and plays on words.
What was that word? The men should be
polyedric. They should have. So the Renaissance men should be versed in all the arts and sciences and everything else. And so they would have been poets and good fighters and strategians, well, good at strategy, and possibly dabbing in, I don't know, painting, drawing, architecture, if you want. So yeah, that was the ideal Renaissance man. Ezio is many of those things in that sense. He's also a bit of a Mary Sue, But yeah, so he fits he fits the profile, and this is me being a boring history professor.
No, we love it. I just popped in to say we love it.
We do. We do.
So
I think you've got to have a sensible name. You can't have Ezio leaps out of another lady's window. That just doesn't fit on the front of the box. So it's got to be something sensible, hasn't it? Declan, go on.
So I'm guessing this leaves Assassin's Creed 3 to be named. Give it a crown. Something exciting. And I'm generally interested to see everyone's opinions because I am sat here right now. I have 6 names and I cannot think of any of them that make sense to call the game. So I may not title this one because I don't know, but I'm really excited to see what everyone else comes up with for Assassin's Creed 3.
I've got a
Steph,
few ideas, but Steph's got her hand up. Steph, take it away.
Yes. As one of the Americans in this conversation, the easy answer is Assassin's Creed. Eat the tea. Just saying.
Perfect.
Truly encapsulates everything the game is about.
So
Eat the
American.
tea. I love it.
See, I was debating between Assassin's Creed Revolution or Assassin's Creed Empire, something like that.
I kept thinking Frontier or Homestead, just because, there's some of the big parts of the game, but they kind of narrow it down too much, if that makes sense. And because I would say, a part of me wanting to say duality, because there is a lot of duality in the story, with Haytham's story, Connor's story. The conflict between America is a revolution between two parties, so duality there. But I'm very scared that I may touch on something that will get me in trouble.
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, the Brits lost. We're both Brits. We're okay with that. We got our tea yeeted. We don't mind. Go on,
We
Bravo.
Brits aren't very good at anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think it's definitely hard to name this one as well, because Revolution, you can basically apply that to a lot of games and a lot of Assassin's Creed games. Because Revolution, I feel like, is just too generic. I really like Frontier and Homestead, but as Declan said, I feel like it narrows it down too much almost. Like, it feels like it's narrowing down the game to just, like, one point of it. And it's, again, the fact of, like, almost a bit of a spoiler as well. But I don't think it's quite as specific as some other spoilery ones could be. And, what else was I going to say? Give me a moment.
You were going to hand over seamlessly to Steph, who raised her hand.
Exactly.
Yes.
Oh, that was fantastic, by the way. Well, Revolutions and Homestead, I think those are fantastic titles. Like, if I were thinking about the release date of Assassin's Creed 3, I'd actually be like, oh my gosh, Assassin's Creed Revolution, what is this? I want to know more. But kind of given that now the conversation about, I keep saying health equity, I apologize. I am a public health scientist, so health equity is my jam. But kind of the conversation of equity among the BIPOC community, I think part of what I would be interested in is seeing a name that kind of reflects that, because Noah Watts, first of all, is fantastic. And we've also been dabbling a lot regarding cultural sensitivity, representation matters movements. I absolutely would love to see a name that reflects that, because one of the very predominating phrases that Connor says in the game is, my enemy is not a nation, it's a notion. And I probably completely butchered that because it's been a very long time, but that still has been one of my absolute favorite quotes from the Assassin's Creed franchise, because that is exactly it. It's not necessarily that that we have a labeling. We don't necessarily label all of our enemies by a particular thing. A lot of things regarding kind of issues that we see today, those are all layers upon layers of issues. And so to see a name that would reflect that would be really, really cool. Ammit, what would you like to contribute to this conversation?
I don't have a good title for it. You know how I feel about. I never played that game. It really did not capture me at all. Although now I live in Boston. And yes, I will go eat some tea in the sea. But I was saying that like the frontier thing is, since we've been talking about, problems and everything else, frontier is such an awful concept because it's basically like colonialism, expansionism, genocide, Western white centric vision 101. Whose frontier is that you're invading? So I'm really happy that that was not, you know, that it was not followed through or chosen, because it would have. I know it was like a different time period and everything else, but right now it would have aged horribly. So I'm glad they did not. And I think Revolution maybe would have worked better. And I was also musing about the fact that the one that is actually about the revolution, like the French Revolution, actually has what the revolution did not bring, which is unity in the title. These are my ramblings, but I'm not. I don't know what I would call Creed 3. I did not play it, so I don't really have an opinion on it. But it's really fascinating to hear everyone.
It makes me wonder. So the ones that have been we've kind of debated and struggled to come up with, let's say, culturally sensitive names for. So Assassin's Creed 1, Assassin's Creed 3. I mean, as you said, even during the period of Assassin's Creed 2, there's a lot of people getting slaughtered. But makes you wonder, did they call Assassin's Creed 3 because they couldn't come up with a name that was both linked to the story, linked to the world, but also sensitive to the stories they were telling and the different cultures and so on that they were showing on screen? And maybe, do you know what, guys, we're going to give it a number because that avoids any controversy with the names that we're coming up with. Go on, Bravo.
That is very possible, given the last two games were named, and then they decided for 3 just to not name it at all, and then 4 they did sort of give a name. So it's a very possible point. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but it's definitely food for thought, you know?
Yeah. Declan.
It's going to sound very counterintuitive, I think the word is, or I'm completely butchering what I'm about to say, but looking at the games that followed, from Black Flag to Valhalla, they don't feel like they could be numbered. I would not play Unity if it was Assassin's Creed 6, because I'm counting Rogue in this. But hearing people trying to come up names for Assassin's Creed 1, 2, and 3, is also at the same time losing the magic of them games, which is very weird, because when I'm thinking about it and hearing all the different names, I'm imagining me at a game shop ready to buy the next Assassin's Creed, and to have it then be like, oh, this is Assassin's Creed, I'm just going to go Rebirth, for example, number 2. I wouldn't have wanted to pick it up. It was the Assassin's Creed 2 that hooked me, it was the sequel. It was, this is interesting. And then with, as I mentioned before, Brotherhood of Revolutions, I just saw them as like mini expansions, especially since I saw Oblivion do that £5 horse arm in Elder Scrolls. It was weird. So I played them and I loved them. But then when we got to 3, that kind of drew me in again. Oh, this is another sequel, another one that I'm going to have to play. I can't wait. But if it was like Frontier Homestead, I'm so glad it wasn't Frontier now, I wouldn't have picked it up. I would have been, I don't know if it's going to fit, because will it fit kind of canonically? And I don't know what changed. I really I don't know why after 3 I really got bored of numbers and got captivated by letters. So I'm kind of confused of why I'm sat here now thinking I don't want them 3 named because they're perfect as they are, but I would also hate everything after 3 to be numbered. So I don't know where my brain's going now. Bravo?
Yeah, I was just gonna add on to what you said. I was thinking that exactly. How I feel like it just wouldn't have felt as magical. Like, if I'm thinking of those different titles, I'm not thinking of those games. Something about those games specifically having a title instead of a number just wouldn't capture me somehow. It's just something about it that having Brotherhood and Revelations having a name is perfect, and 1, 2, and 3 not having a name and just having a number is perfect. And again, something about 4 having both a number and a name is perfect. I don't know how to explain it, but it just does feel perfect, and it feels like it captures the magic. And maybe that's just because what we got. It might be totally possible if we got something else that would have felt perfect. You can never know, really. But that's just how I feel with it.
I think that thing with Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag having both the number and the title, I wonder if it's more of a transitionary aspect of things, because that was during a time period where there was supposed to be an Assassin's Creed game being released at least once a year, and we got a number of titles, which was really cool and interesting. But I think part of that is really just kind of the transitional periods of expanding the franchise. I don't know if that's like a legitimate thing or whatnot, but I think it was probably a smart decision looking back now, in that, you know, from that point on, we no longer labeled the Assassin's Creed games as 5, 6, 7, 8, etc.
So I think the last point I can think of, unless James comes up with something cool, because my mind has gone blank.
I've got a nice question for the guests lined up if you're
Perfect.
if you game.
Well,
All
I'll
right.
ask this question and then
Go
you
for
can ask
it.
yours. So the first question I could ask would be, what's everyone's favourite title name, and what's their least favourite, and what's their least favourite? For me, my favourite has to be Origins. I just love the name. And I think my least favourite has always been, even though I love the game, Syndicate. For some reason the name hasn't clicked, but I do love the game. Who wants to go first? Or should I pick someone randomly and point them out like a teacher? I'm going to pick on Steph.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so believe it or not, so I say that Assassin's Creed Syndicate is my favorite game, but the Odyssey is also a very close, very close second. And this is more of a personal thing for me. So when I was in high school, I've only actually had 2 high school English teachers, and for those who are familiar with the American system, we have 4 years of high school. So typically speaking, we would change different teachers every single year. But nonetheless, so I was lucky enough to have just 2. And my favorite English teacher, well, they were both great. He was really into mythology, in particular Greek mythology. And so I remember I had invited him to my graduation party for high school, and he had given me a copy of the Iliad and the Odyssey, because the translation that we had in school, awful. It was so boring. But, you know, given that, though, I still very much enjoyed the story of the Odyssey. And even a million years after the fact, a lady never tells her age, right? But even a million years after the fact, you know, I still to this day think about the Odyssey, and I still kind of use it as a very strong motivation for me to continue to do well in school, continue to kind of just enjoy and embrace the better part of yourself, because the story of Odysseus just being this warrior who just wanted to go home, that really does have a very special place in my heart. So as far as title goes, Assassin's Creed Odyssey is easily my favorite. And then not too far afterwards would be Syndicate. And I like it because, you know, there's this really interesting dynamic with that word. Like, Syndicate, it means a lot of different things, right? Like, I think of like gangs, and I think of the unions, and kind of given how things are in the US, it's very important to have these conversations. And so it does kind of go pretty much in depth with that. But yeah, so that's my answer.
Ammit, over to you.
Okay, and I have opinions on Odysseus and his actual will to go home, but we can talk about it somewhere else. We can beat the crap out of each other somewhere else. So wow, this is a big question. So my favorite title would have to be Origins, and I say this like retroactively, because after playing the game and playing the Hidden Ones DLC, it really fits. Like, it really is the perfect title, because it's the origin of everything, and like every tenet, and you even see like how the original concept gets tweaked and modified, mostly in the DLC, to fit better the reality with which they were dealing, which I found fantastic. You know, show-stopping, excellent, never the same. You know, the Lady Gaga gif. I'm doing that right now at my microphone. So I think that Origin is the perfect one. Least favorite, to be honest, I don't really have a least favorite. I think that most of them fit. If we talk about titles of the DLCs, then I have to renew my burning hate for Legacy of the First Blade for many reasons, not just plot wise, but I just think that the title sucks.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
is that is my two cents. Like that is like the DLC that no one needed, no one wanted, and yet we had to swallow it. And I hate it. I hate everything about it. The title, the plot, the characters, everything, everything. And the fact that it retcons many things. So I think that my hate will go to that. But as for the main games, I think that they all fit. Even Rogue, that I know people have many polarizing opinion about it, I think that the title actually works, and it is kind of the Rogue card in the franchise.
Absolutely. Bravo.
To follow up on that, I think I actually have a three-way split tie because for me, it's really hard in the franchise to actually decide which title would be the best. And to me, it's kind of a three-way split tie between Rogue, because I think Rogue is, as Ammit said, the Rogue game, and I think the title just fits somehow. It just hits hard with its title. And Origins, as Declan said, because I think it's honestly a really strong title and it just encapsulates everything of the game. But I also really like Unity because although not really fitting the French Revolution itself, it does fit the game really well. I think it just fits the game and everything it is really well. And I'm sorry I keep saying this fits the game and everything it is really well. I just don't know how to explain my thoughts.
That's okay. We're not in an English exam, so you can use the same words over and over again.
Yay.
But I want to turn this question back around to my dear co-host, Declan. Now you need to answer your own question.
What do you mean? I think I answered my own question, didn't I? I'm hiding now.
Or maybe you did. Maybe you did.
Origins favorite, Syndicate not so favorite. I don't know.
Understood.
Love the game, just don't find the title as snappy. I'm weird. Maybe. No, it's not in its FW. I go now. Ammit?
Oh yeah, no, I was saying like who among us hasn't answered yet? I'm looking at people suspiciously.
It's me. I dodged it. So, Declan, would you repeat the question?
So the question is, what would be your favorite title and least favorite title? I'm pretty assuming Odyssey and Unity is a joint favorite title.
See, right. So you know me well, right? And you know where my mind was going already. And that's the thing. I'm not sure if I can separate the title from the experience I had playing it. But I'd tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give a shout out to a couple of the, should we call them the spin-offs, Liberation and Freedom Cry. I think those are great titles to have as part of a game. I'm looking at the list of titles, right? I'm looking at the Wikipedia page here because it's just got a really nice summary of all the game titles and their release history. I don't think there's a bad title among them. Syndicate, although you've commented on it, it does what it says. The writers wanted to blend the twins fighting with kind of the Industrial Revolution, as Ammit said, and the rise of things like trades union, but also the whole kind of gang syndicates and crime syndicate side of the story. I don't know. My heart will always be drawn to Odyssey because it was my first, you know. Revelations is a diplomatic approach. Do you know? No, Revelations is a pretty cool title, I think.
Just go with the diplomatic approach of they're all perfect.
I can't do that. That's a get out of jail kind of free card. I'm gonna say Revelations is an excellent title for a game.
So have you?
Oh, you asked me for my least favorite. I didn't think of least favorite.
It's fine. We don't have to do least favorites.
No, I'm going to do it. I'm going to say, although again, it makes sense because it was the sequel, Assassin's Creed 2, but it doesn't say anything except that it's a sequel. Yeah. Actually, I'm looking down the Wikipedia list here. There's a game that was released on Android called Assassin's Creed Unity Arno's Chronicles. What the heck is that?
I have
I need to
never heard of that.
hopefully someone's like uploaded some gameplay to YouTube and I can watch it because it's got my boy Arno in it. But anyway, we're already going way off topic. So I'm not sure if there is a bad one because they all make sense. Yeah, I'm copping out of this one, Declan. I refuse to answer.
It's fine. And you confused me because I have been following mobile games for Assassin's Creed, and the only Assassin's Creed Unity one I know was the companion app, which helped you solve the Nostradamus things, and there was like the pirates one, but you have made me confused. People,
Yeah, there was a mobile companion for Black Flag, wasn't there? I think.
There was actually one called Pirates, which was very weird because it didn't actually affect the game and it wasn't Assassin's Creed related. It was literally just a pirate and he did some like temple run style running through treasure chests. It's weird. I don't know where my train of thought's going. Steph, can you save me?
I was just gonna say, really, Assassin's Creed Pirate was just a fun little game because people absolutely adored the pirate mechanics of Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which I was one of those people, and I played the heck out of it. So I think that's just kind of really what kind of happened with that game, where it wasn't really anything except literally just simplifying the mechanics of the Black Flag ship stuff. So that's kind of really it.
No, interesting. Okay.
Oh, James, do you have a final point before we wrap up?
You know, I thought of a really good question earlier, and I didn't write it down because I'm a muppet. So do you know what, Declan? Wrap up the show.
I started this show with 20 questions. I have no questions left because I've forgotten to write them down as well. So
That is exactly how I feel right now.
this is how the show
all
runs.
in all, another professional show.
So
We
good
are
at
good
this.
at this.
Exactly.
Yes.
But now we're gonna be curious for the rest of the night about what the cool question was.
Exactly.
It's really annoying me because
Gonna
I
be
always
staying
have
all night.
paper and pen next to me, right? And I will scribble down things. And I've written nothing today. What a muppet. Anyway, never
Because
mind.
we had so much fun.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's the fun that matters.
So this is all we have time for. I'm actually happy this podcast came to be because one of the scariest things about doing the podcast is editing. And I'm always scared to have more than 2 or 3 guests on the show. So to have all of you on board has been such an incredible experience that you have to come back on because I need more people. And Zencaster has a limit of 10 people, and I'm scared James may see that and be like, hey, let's get 8 people on board. So I'm terrified that will happen.
I want to test your editing abilities.
Oh.
Absolutely.
I'm scared people.
Let's go test his editing prowess right now. Let's do it.
Don't-
Everyone talk at the same time.
Yes.
I am
Ah!
Chaos.
Absolute monsters, all of you.
I
Thank
do
you. I
think-
take pride in it.
Declan, we've killed him. Declan, oh my word. Come back to us.
You gotta take him to the Pokemon
You
Center.
killed the poor man. It's unfortunate.
I broke the podcast. Help! I knew setting up this podcast it was going to descend into chaos, and I'm so proud it has.
We're growing too strong. We're breaking the fourth wall.
The
It's too
force.
late, Declan. The process has begun.
I want to thank everybody so much for coming on board. This has been an excellent show, and it is, I should add this now, the first show releasing after Let's Talk's 2nd anniversary, which is kind of scary. 2 years, you know, started with a mobile phone and a 12-pound headset. I am now sat on a computer with 4 of my strongest friends, a fantastic co-host, and I don't know where I'm going with this, so...
I just, as you said, it's the 2nd anniversary. I've only been here 3 months. I didn't get you any flowers, mate, and it's our anniversary. I'm so sorry. I shall send chocolates.
There's a gas station near me. That's kind of like the last bit.
I'm not a guy to do petrol station flowers. That's a cheap move. I'm a bit
I like-
classier than that.
I like co-op flowers. Does that count? Sorry, but this is totally off top.
Get a room.
Well, Zencaster is a recording room, so this is
We
a
don't
room.
record that kind of podcast, my friend. That's very much an after dark show.
The fans want. The fans will care. I'm sorry. So if you all have enjoyed this, sorry, I'll compose myself. So if you've all enjoyed this episode and you're intrigued and have your own thoughts on titles, please reach out on Twitter at AC Let's Talk and at James Quid. I would love to hear everyone's opinions. I'm excited for what's more to come, especially with this being our third year of the show, which is kind of terrifying to keep saying year 3. So thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you all next week.
See you all soon. Thanks, everyone.
See you all soon. Thanks so much. That was fun.